Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10. With me, David Brooks, this week, all on my own again. This time, I'm going to talk you through what I spotted coming out of the Pensions UK conference, an update on ICO and the Capita cyber attack, and then finally, we take a look at the Sterling 20. Okay, first up, we had Pensions UK last week, previously known as the PLSA, the conference held in Manchester, maybe akin to the Glastonbury of the pensions world, where trustees, providers of all shapes and sizes meet up to network and find out what's going on with the pensions industry. Pensions UK, quite a big hitter, so they get some big speakers coming in. So they had people like Louis Theroux, who closed the show. But of course, they get the pensions minister coming along. So apparently there was standing room only for his session. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, so this is just based on reports that I've read. And he was talking about a number of things, but one of the first things he said, which was something maybe to warm the cockles of us pensions professionals as the seasons turn, that he sees us as heroes. People who work in pensions do so as often as a vocation. Okay, maybe many of us, our entrance into the pensions industry may have been happenstance, but once we're here, it's an interesting puzzle to try to solve the pensions issues that people have, helping, it can be a force for good, helping people receive the pensions they need when they retire. All the things in between, making good decisions, good governance, good investments, all these sorts of things are things that, people I've worked with over the last 25, 30 years of working in pensions, I definitely see it. And, colleagues, administrators at the coalface, actuaries and investment consultants as well, they all work hard to try to do their best for the clients and ultimately for the members. So it's nice to see that recognised by the minister. But he also noted it in the context of the trusteeship consultation that is now going to come through towards the end of this year. This was previously announced by the regulator, so it's not necessarily anything new, but I think it's just worth taking stock a little bit of the context of that consultation because it's going to be pretty interesting. And it's also coming at quite a difficult time, because if you think about the government's goal is to have fewer larger pension schemes, and that will ultimately mean fewer trustees. But also, that's sort of in the DC space. But on the DB space, we have lots of legacy schemes, still 5,000 odd DB pension schemes, some of them going towards buy-in and then ultimately buyout, and some looking to run on, and some still maybe some time off that because of some funding challenges they may still have. So having a trustee consultation that's able to deal with the issues in sort of DC master trust world, which have very different set of challenges to DB trustees, and not always the same things. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the regulator and the government weave that path to make sure it's a consultation that's actually meaningful for the future. This is probably where they're going to look, but doesn't inadvertently cause any issues for the present with trustees still working that through. And that equally could be the professionalism of trustees as well as lay trustees. As many of us know, we work with lay trustees who are excellent and make great decisions. And so it's not necessarily professionalism by all means, and to get rid of those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how the government and the regulator take through that consultation. There was also a bit of a tete-a-tete between Torsten Bell and previous Pensions Minister Steve Webb on the subject of mandating of investments. So this is something we might come back to in the last story as well, but the government have this power, or this reserve power in the pensions bill, whereby they will be able to compel certain schemes, DC schemes, I think is the main focus so far, but DC schemes who want to write new business as a master trust or some kind of DC provider for under auto enrollment, they will need to allocate 10% of their assets to private equity or infrastructure, of which X percent, 5% should be in the UK. And there is still a lot of disquiet, which was Steve Webb representing the nervousness of the industry, because it's okay for one particular government perhaps, but if governments change or government's goals change, what will go into that bucket of the mandating investment class? And so there's definitely a concern. Torsten Bell told us all to chillax. Kind of makes me cringe using that word in my now 50s to say that word, but tell us all to chillax about that. And I think that's, I don't know, it feels like that's slightly dismissive, and it's not really addressing the concerns that people have legitimately have, I think. I'm still surprised that a lot of this, compacts, Mansion House compacts and accords and all these sorts of things, that hasn't been done a bit more softly. Having this sort of baseball bat in the boot of the car that the minister could bring out and start swinging around and have material impacts on pension funds business does seem over the top. I'm surprised it wasn't more of a softly. Let's look at a social contract kind of argument. Let's say that pension schemes should be investing in the UK, should be investing in things that are good for society, and then building those opportunities and saying, look, this is a great opportunity for you to do, and perhaps some tax breaks or some other things on the side to make it just a little bit more, enticing, rather than having this mandation power, as I say, like in the boot of the car that they can just bring out and say, well, you haven't done it, so we're going to make you do it. So there was that. So that was interesting. So it looks like that's going to continue that debate. And I think that was it. They were the main. I was just looking at my notes, but they were my main highlights from Pensions UK. Okay, so the next story I just wanted just to very quickly tick off is around cybersecurity and cyber risk. So it's well known that Capita had a cyber attack in 2023, and repercussions of that are still being felt within Capita. I'm sure they're still working through a lot of the issues around that. And this isn't trying to, pour anything onto a competitor. This is just purely reporting it that this has happened. And the ICO have recently issued a £14 million fine. So that's been agreed with Capita for the security failings that went around that incident. And the only reason to raise this is, a lot of our listeners are trustees, and the more I talk to trustee clients about risk, given the improvements to funding that many have experienced, that cyber risk, alongside regulatory risk, that's another matter, but cyber risk is definitely up there as probably the biggest risk that trustees face. Data security, around the security for their members, the impact on members, ability to pay pensions and run payrolls, and even down to fraudulent activity which could risk assets. They are the areas that trustees feel most exposed by. It's confusing, it's complicated, it feels sometimes opaque and outside the reach of trustees' abilities. And this is just something for trustees to note, that when things go wrong, there are fines that will get thrown around. Obviously, this is going to a provider rather than the trustees, but still, it's a major issue and still something that trustees should be monitoring and doing what they can to mitigate as much as possible. Okay, and finally, this broke over the weekend and is going to make headlines across today, Monday, the day recording, and also Tuesday, when it's going to be fully announced at the Regional Investment Summit in Birmingham. And so this is where 20 pension providers, so guys like L&G, NatWest Cushion I've seen, there's loads of others, I'm sure you'll see the names, have joined up to create the Sterling 20. So a group of pension providers and insurers, M&G, I think, are in there as well, looking to allocate funds towards infrastructure and into the UK. And one of the initial announcements is that L&G are allocating £2 billion by 2030 to build 10,000 more affordable homes and also 24,000 jobs nationwide. Nest are also involved, will provide Schroders with £500 million, of which £100 million is expected to be channeled into UK investments in the coming year. So going back to what I was talking about with the mandation piece in the Pensions UK, I was looking at the Mansion House Accord. So this was the second thing, the Mansion House Compact in July 23, and the Accord in July 24. And so part of that is, part of those if statements, there's a number of if statements that need to happen for the Accord to kick in. And presumably, if the Accord fails, for the reserve power to mandate investment to kick in as well. So this is the sort of things that need to happen within the industry and from government. And the number one thing, which I just want to just double check is the number one thing, I'm pretty sure is that a pipeline of UK investment opportunities, which the government has agreed to facilitate. So that needs to exist. And it feels like this is the government trying to do their side of the bargain. They will create the opportunities. There's some talk around the National Wealth Fund again that's resurfaced among these conversations. So again, this is the government saying, we know we've got our side of the bargain. We need to create things that are compelling for you to invest in, because that would be the first thing. If the government see that investments aren't happening in 2030, 2035, and say, well, why not? And the investment consultants or these master trusts and insurers go, you didn't give us anything to invest in. None of this stuff was on the shelf that we could use. That would be pretty embarrassing for the government. So the government are going to have to try to build. The first task is to build the opportunities. Build it, and they will come. Is the the oft-used phrase. So this feels like it's the government side of that. There's going to be more announcements, I'm sure, on today. The day this is released on that Tuesday, October 21st, which is when the summit's happening in Birmingham. So yeah, definitely want to keep an eye on, as that's where the opportunities are going to be coming through for schemes to invest in. Okay, thanks for listening and joining me this week for what I've spotted in the world of pensions that I think is interesting and worth bringing to your attention. If you see this on LinkedIn, please give me a like if you got this far. Well done. But give me a like and a share, or even comment on anything that I've said. If I said something wrong, maybe don't say that. But anything interesting, perhaps you can pick me up on. If you see this on YouTube via the subscribing, that's great. But if you want to get these into your inbox, then you can go to broadstone.co.uk and go to the Pensions and Tents page, and you can subscribe and get these dropping in your inbox. We do that on Wednesday mornings. Okay, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.